Before we dive back into this chaos, drop a comment and tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Maybe it's a sunny street in California, a packed neighborhood in Chicago, or even a quiet little town out in Texas. I always love seeing just how far these Karen stories of trash, drama, and karma can reach. The sound of plastic scraping asphalt woke me before the sun had fully cleared the rooftops. I pulled the blinds aside and felt my stomach drop. My trash can lay tipped over at the end of the driveway, a week's worth of garbage spilling out across the lawn like entrails. Coffee grounds, orange peels, fast food wrappers, all of it scattered in the street, catching the light of the rising day. It wasn't the first time. I dragged the bin upright, the wheels squeaking in protest, and muttered under my breath. For weeks now, every few nights, I'd wake to find the same scene. My trash tipped over, sometimes dented, sometimes halfway down the street. It wasn't animals. I knew the difference. This was deliberate. Someone wanted me angry. Someone wanted me humiliated. That morning, as I knelt to scoop soggy paper towels off the grass, I caught sight of black rubber streaks curving into the street. Tire marks. Fresh ones. Wide enough to belong to something big. The frustration hardened into suspicion. Whoever was doing this wasn't just a prankster. They were using their car to do it. Day after day, it kept happening. And every time I picked up the trash, I felt like I was cleaning up after someone else's joke at my expense. The neighbors saw me crouched on my knees, stuffing garbage back into torn bags, and I could feel their silent pity. I was 38 years old, worked hard for my home, and now I looked like a fool in my own driveway. The breaking point came one Thursday night. I couldn't sleep, so I sat by the window in the dark, a mug of stale coffee in my hand, the glow of the street lamp painting the sidewalk. At first, nothing stirred. Then I heard it, the slow roll of tires, the faint bass of a radio. A white SUV crawled into view, its headlights dimmed. I leaned forward, breath held. The SUV angled toward my driveway, like a predator circling prey. Behind the wheel, I saw two silhouettes moving, their laughter sharp even through the glass. The engine revved, and the vehicle lurched forward. The trash can toppled in an instant, bouncing against the curb with a hollow clang as garbage burst across the pavement. For a moment I was stunned, caught between disbelief and rage. Then the SUV rolled past, and I finally saw their faces illuminated by the dashboard glow. Two women, middle-aged, thick-set, their features twisted with amusement. The one in the passenger seat threw her head back, laughing so hard I thought she might choke. The driver leaned over the wheel, smirking as if she had just scored a goal. Ashley and Madison. I knew them, of course. Everyone in the neighborhood did. The sisters were in their early 40s, loud, controlling, and forever strutting around with the air of self-appointed authority. They had wormed their way into the HOA years ago, and since then, they acted like the block was their personal kingdom. Ashley, the one behind the wheel, was notorious for her short temper and her endless supply of floral print dresses that barely kept her contained. Madison, usually at her side, favored flashy blouses and black pants, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Together they were unstoppable, always ready to tell you how your lawn was too long, your paint was too dull, your car too dirty. And now, apparently, they had found a new hobby. Me. I sat frozen at the window, staring at the wreckage of my trash can. Their SUV rolled away slowly, taillights glowing red like the eyes of a monster disappearing into the night. My fists clenched until the ceramic mug cracked in my hand, scalding coffee dripping onto the floor. The next morning, the sisters didn't bother hiding. They were parked across the street, leaning against their SUV, talking loudly enough for me to hear as I picked up the trash yet again. "Looks like someone's got a littering problem," Madison called out, her tone dripping with mock concern. Ashley laughed, adjusting her sunglasses. "Maybe he should buy a sturdier bin." "Oh wait, does that even fit in the HOA guidelines?" Their voices grated on me, every word a reminder that they knew exactly what they were doing. And worse, they thought they were untouchable. They had power in the HOA, and they had the kind of arrogance that comes from never being challenged. I wanted to march across the street, shout until their smug faces fell, but something stopped me. Their confidence wasn't just in their mouths. It was in their eyes, the way they looked at me like I was nothing more than entertainment. If I confronted them now, they'd twist it, call it harassment, maybe even get the HOA to fine me. They'd win. So I stayed silent, gathering banana peels with a plastic bag, while their laughter followed me like smoke. But silence didn't mean surrender. I spent the next few days watching. The sisters' routine became clear. Around midnight, they'd drive slow laps through the neighborhood, circling like vultures, then swing by my driveway and give the bin another shove. Sometimes they clipped it lightly, just enough to knock it over. Sometimes they hit harder, leaving fresh dents in the thin plastic. Their SUV, once pristine, now bore faint scratches on the bumper, though they didn't seem to care. It was their game, their nightly ritual, and it was about to end. The night I finally caught them red-handed, I didn't even blink. I watched them line up their SUV with the can, heard the engine roar, saw the headlights flare as they struck. The bin toppled, the contents exploding across the road, and their laughter pierced the air. That sound, that shrill, gleeful cackle, was burned into my mind. I whispered to myself in the dark, a promise forming with every syllable. All right, Ashley. All right, Madison. You've had your fun. My hands tightened on the window frame as their SUV disappeared down the block, leaving garbage and silence in their wake. The rage that had simmered for weeks crystallized into something sharper, cleaner. A plan. The next morning, I dragged the cracked, battered trash can to the side of the garage and stared at it. The flimsy plastic was no match for a vehicle, but maybe that was the point. If they wanted to hit it, I'd give them something worth hitting. Something they'd never see coming. I glanced at the corner of the yard where an old slab of concrete leaned against the fence, heavy and forgotten. A slow, deliberate smile crept across my face. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel powerless. I felt patient. The sisters thought they had me cornered, trapped in humiliation. They had no idea I was about to turn the game on them. And when I did, it wouldn't just be me watching. It would be the whole neighborhood. And maybe if I played this right, the law. Before I dive into what happened next, let me quickly say, if you've been enjoying this story, you'll probably love one of my best ones. Asterisk, Karen sisters kept running over my driveway lights, so I replaced them with industrial-grade ones. Asterisk, I've linked it in the description and added it to the end screen, so make sure to check it out after this. Now, back to the trash can war. The morning after I'd seen the sisters in action, I decided to test a different approach. I walked across the street, steadying my voice, rehearsing the calm words I'd tell myself were reasonable. They were lounging by their SUV, sipping iced coffees, gossiping like queens on their thrones. Ashley spotted me first, her lips curling into a smirk. "Morning," I said, forcing evenness into my tone. "Look, I know it's been you two knocking over my trash. I'm asking you politely to stop." For half a beat, silence stretched between us. Madison tilted her head back and laughed, the sound sharp and condescending. Ashley leaned against the hood of the SUV, her floral dress stretching uncomfortably as she folded her arms. "Polite?" she repeated, mocking the word. "Sweetheart, if your trash can't stay standing, maybe it doesn't belong on the curb." Madison chimed in, her eyes flashing. "Or maybe you don't belong here at all. HOA rules are clear, and we get to decide how they're enforced." Their laughter stung, not because of the insult itself, but because of how effortless their cruelty was. I realized in that moment that I wasn't just dealing with a nuisance. I was dealing with bullies who thrived on intimidation. If I pushed back directly, they'd twist the narrative. And they'd win, because that was what they always did. I gave them one last chance. "I'm not asking again. You keep doing this, you're going to regret it." Ashley clapped her hands together mockingly. "Oh, I'm terrified." Madison leaned in closer, her perfume sickly sweet, her voice a near whisper. "Try anything, and we'll have the whole neighborhood against you. Remember who runs this street." That was their mistake. That night, like clockwork, I heard the SUV rolling slow. The engine purred. The sisters' voices carried through the night air, and then came the dull, hollow thud of plastic against metal. Another strike, another victory for them. But when I stepped outside afterward, staring at the wreckage, I wasn't angry anymore. I was calculating. The next day, I set my plan in motion. The flimsy plastic bin was gone, hauled into the garage like a retired soldier. In its place, I positioned a reinforced trash can I'd spent all afternoon crafting. At its core was a thick block of concrete I'd salvaged from the side yard. Hidden within a casing, I carefully cut and painted to match the dull gray of the original bin. From a distance, it looked ordinary, maybe even flimsy. But up close, if you tried to budge it, it didn't move an inch. I tested it myself, giving it a shove with all my weight. The thing didn't so much as wobble. Perfect. But concrete alone wasn't enough. I wanted witnesses. I wanted more than dents and scratches. I wanted the sisters caught with no escape. So I called the police. At first, the dispatcher sounded skeptical, almost amused. But when I explained the pattern, the deliberate targeting, the reckless driving through a residential street, they agreed to send a patrol car to observe. I could hear the hesitation in their voice, as if they expected nothing more than another neighborly spat. That was fine. Doubt would make the payoff even sweeter. For 2 nights, the SUV didn't come. The trash can sat untouched, upright, almost taunting me with its stillness. I wondered if the sisters had noticed something was different, or if they were just busy tormenting someone else. But on the 3rd night, I heard it again, the low hum of the engine, the faint music pulsing like a predator's heartbeat. I stood at my window, lights off, heart pounding, as the SUV crept closer. Ashley was driving this time, her face faintly lit by the dashboard. Madison sat in the passenger seat, gesturing wildly as she laughed, pointing at my driveway like it was her personal comedy stage. The SUV revved. Tires squealed softly against the asphalt as Ashley lined up her shot. Then, with a sudden burst of acceleration, she rammed forward. The sound was nothing like before. Instead of the hollow clang of plastic toppling, there was a deep metallic crunch, followed by the shriek of bending steel. The SUV lurched violently, its hood folding like paper against the unyielding concrete. The airbags exploded with muffled booms, filling the cabin with white clouds. Steam hissed out from beneath the crumpled hood. Neighbors' lights flicked on. Doors opened. People came out in pajamas and slippers, drawn by the chaos. Phones rose into the air, recording. The sisters were no longer in control of the story. They were the story. The passenger door burst open first. Madison stumbled out, coughing, her blouse wrinkled, hair disheveled. She shouted incoherently, pointing at my driveway as though the concrete bin had attacked her. Ashley followed, red-faced, clutching her arm where the airbag had struck. Their SUV sat crippled, smoke drifting upward like a white flag of surrender. I stepped outside slowly, coffee mug in hand, my German shepherd at my side. The morning air was cool, carrying the faint scent of scorched rubber and leaking coolant. I didn't need to say a word. The sight was enough. But then Ashley saw me. Her fury boiled over, and she stormed toward me, jabbing a finger in my direction. You set this up. This is entrapment, sabotage. Whatever you want to call it, you're going to pay for this. Madison echoed her, screeching. That's right. You think you're clever? You're finished here. Their voices rose over one another, but I noticed the shift happening around us. Neighbors whispered, some chuckling, others shaking their heads. Phones were still pointed, lenses capturing every second of their tantrum. And then the police arrived. The squad car rolled up silently, lights flashing red and blue against the suburban houses. An officer stepped out with a notepad in hand, expression unreadable. He took the scene quickly. The wrecked SUV, the immovable trash can, the 2 women flailing with rage. Then his gaze settled on me, calm and composed with my coffee and dog. What happened here? He asked, though his eyes already told me he understood. Ashley rushed forward, waving her arms dramatically. This man. He set a trap in his driveway. Look at our car. He destroyed it. Madison added, we were just driving by, minding our business, and bam! He tried to kill us. The officer scribbled something, then looked past them to the SUV. He crouched, examined the bumper pressed against the concrete bin, and shook his head. His voice, when he spoke, was measured. "Ma'am, from what I can see, this vehicle intentionally rammed that bin. And judging from the impact, you weren't exactly creeping along." Ashley's face flushed scarlet. Madison sputtered, searching for words that wouldn't come. The officer straightened, adjusting his notepad. "I'll need to take your statements. But let me be clear, reckless driving and property damage in a residential area is a serious offense." The sisters froze. For once, they had no comeback. I sipped my coffee, the warmth steadying me, and let the silence fill the space. The trap had sprung. They were caught, and the weight of it was beginning to crush them. But this was only the beginning. The night had revealed their arrogance. The morning would deliver their punishment. The flashing lights painted the street in red and blue, washing over the perfectly trimmed hedges and neat driveways. The sisters stood in the middle of it all, their white SUV mangled, the hood bent upward like the jaw of a broken beast. Steam hissed from beneath, mingling with the acrid smell of burned oil. Their laughter, the nightly soundtrack I had grown used to, was gone. In its place came frantic shouting, shrill and desperate, echoing off the quiet houses. Ashley clutched her arm, pacing in tight, angry circles. Madison dabbed at her face with a crumpled napkin, her voice trembling as she hurled accusations toward anyone who would listen. But the neighbors didn't step in this time. They stood on porches, lined the sidewalks, phones raised high, some whispering while others simply stared. The balance of power had shifted. The sisters were no longer feared rulers of the block. They were spectacle. The officer who had taken their statements returned to his car, speaking softly into his radio. Another officer arrived, then a tow truck. The sisters' panic rose with every new arrival. "You can't tow that," Ashley shrieked, stepping in front of the SUV. "That's private property." The officer didn't flinch. "Ma'am, the vehicle is disabled and obstructing the road. It needs to be removed." Madison's voice cracked as she shouted, "This man tricked us. He set a trap. Look at that thing. It's a weapon, not a trash can." I sat on the steps of my porch, my German Shepherd at my feet, coffee still steaming in my mug. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had spent weeks turning my mornings into humiliations, and now I was the picture of calm while they unraveled for everyone to see. The officer finally turned toward me. "Sir, can you explain the situation from your side?" I stood, setting the mug down carefully. My words were measured, deliberate. For weeks, someone's been deliberately knocking over my trash can with a vehicle. I didn't know who at first, but eventually I saw it was them. I replaced the flimsy can with something sturdier. They came back tonight, as expected, and drove into it. I didn't move the bin out of place. I didn't ask them to ram it. They did that themselves. The officer studied me, then glanced at the neighbors. One by one, they nodded subtly, confirming the pattern. Even those who had remained quiet for so long now seemed eager to see the sisters fall. Ashley's voice rose, a sharp edge of hysteria creeping in. "You don't understand. We're on the HOA board. We enforce the rules here. He can't just defy us like this." The officer's eyebrows lifted slightly. Enforcing rules does not give you the right to intentionally damage property or endanger lives. That's not how the law works. Madison's face drained of color. She looked at her sister, but Ashley's fury blinded her too much to notice. The sisters were used to bending neighbors to their will, but the law was a different kind of opponent. The tow truck driver climbed out, gave the SUV a long, almost pitying glance, and began hooking it to the rig. The scraping of metal against chains sent a ripple of whispers through the crowd. Phones zoomed in, lenses catching every detail. The sisters shouted over the noise, their protests growing weaker with each passing second. "You're going to regret this." Ashley screamed at me, her face blotchy with rage. "You think you've won, but we'll come after you in court. We'll bury you in complaints." I met her glare evenly. "You already buried yourself." Her mouth opened to retort, but nothing came out. For the first time, Ashley looked small. Not physically. Her frame was still broad and imposing, but stripped of authority, her bluster fell flat. Madison tugged at her sleeve, whispering frantically, urging her to quiet down, but Ashley only shook her off. The officers issued citations, their pens scratching steadily across paper. Reckless driving, property damage, endangerment, each word etched into official record, impossible for the sisters to twist into their usual stories. One officer explained the consequences clearly: fines, points on their licenses, mandatory court appearances. The sisters tried to argue, but their voices cracked under the weight of their own defeat. When the tow truck finally rolled away, hauling the crippled SUV into the night, the silence left behind was deafening. The sisters stood on the curb, trembling with rage, their empire crumbling around them. The neighbors, emboldened, no longer hid their amusement. A man down the block clapped once, slow and deliberate. Another laughed outright, the sound spreading until chuckles echoed up and down the street. The sisters turned, their faces red with humiliation, but there was no power left in their glares. They had lost the one thing they valued most, the illusion of control. I returned to my porch, my dog following faithfully, and lowered myself onto the step. The steam had thinned from my coffee, but I sipped it anyway, savoring the bitterness. Ashley and Madison's voices carried faintly, still arguing with each other as they waited for a ride, but their words no longer mattered. Their downfall was complete, and it was public. The officer approached me one last time, offering a faint smile. "Looks like you handled this the smart way. We'll file the report. If they try anything else, call us immediately." "Thank you," I said simply. As he walked away, I leaned back against the railing, letting the night air wash over me. The adrenaline ebbed, replaced by a quiet satisfaction. The sisters had chosen their game, and I had played it better. Their arrogance had become the rope they tied around their own necks. Neighbors began retreating into their homes, conversations buzzing with the story they'd no doubt retell for weeks. Some gave me nods of approval, others small smiles. For the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel like the target of ridicule. I felt like the man who had stood his ground and won. Ashley and Madison, meanwhile, were left stranded on the curb, their once pristine SUV reduced to scrap metal, their reputations torn apart with it. They glared at me from across the street, but the fire in their eyes was muted, smothered by the weight of their defeat. I took one last sip of coffee and looked at them steadily. "Sometimes," I said aloud, though mostly to myself, "the trash takes itself out." My dog let out a low, satisfied huff, almost like agreement. The sisters turned away, seething in silence, and for once they had no audience to command. No laughter followed them, no whispers of fear. Only the hollow echo of their own downfall. The night settled back into quiet, broken only by the chirp of crickets and the distant hum of the tow truck fading into darkness. Justice had been served, and the neighborhood would never look at Ashley and Madison the same way again. And yet, as I sat there, watching them retreat into the shadows, I knew this wasn't the end of their story. Their pride was too stubborn, their anger too deep. They would try something again, but this time I would be ready, and so would everyone else who had seen them fall. If you enjoyed this wild ride, make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment down below, and let me know what you thought of this revenge. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories just like this one, and share it with someone who could use a good laugh at a Karen finally getting what's coming to her.